Hello, students. Today we are going to study the poem The Shed. Before reading an explanation of this poem, we should know about the poet. Frank Flyan, Catholic priest, ophthalmologist, and author, was born on 6 December 1906 in Sydney, one of the 9 children born to Dr. John Flynn and Maud May, née Witten. John Flynn had arrived in Australia from Ireland in 1888, where he had been house surgeon in the Master Misericordiae Hospital in Dublin. Frank Flynn commenced his education at the Brigidine Convent in Redwick, Sydney. Along with his 5 brothers, he was then educated by the Marist brothers at Darlinghurst, Sydney. They all excelled at study and all went into medicine. In 1925, Frank Flynn started his medical studies at Sydney University. In 1933, he sailed to England on Jervis Bay as ship's surgeon. He studied and worked at the Royal Ophthalmic Hospital. In London, the world's oldest and famous eye hospital, not yet 30, he made several important contributions to the study of eye disease, including the introduction of a new drug which he named midricine and the design and patenting of a medicine or machine used in operating on detached retinas. After ordination, Flynn was sent to the Northern Territory where he had as attached to the army as a major, serving in the duel of the chaplain and epithalmist. Military life and discipline was not entirely new to the Flynn as he had undergone compulsory military training at school as a junior and senior cadet and was later in the university regiment. He was attached in succession to Australian General Hospital. After the war ended, Flynn conducted many studies on trachoma from Commonwealth Department of Health. In 1955, made a full report on his finding the Medical Journal of Australia. Flynn was demobilized in 1946 and took up duties as administrator or parish priest of St. Mary's, Darwin, a parish covering 300 square miles. His famous book was Northern Gateway, The Living Heart, Rebuilding the Beacon Point in 1992. The Shed. The poem is about the shed, which is a small room away from the main house. It is located at the bottom of the poet's garden. Do you know what a shed is? The shed is a small covered place usually where pets or animals are kept. For storing or keeping things, animals, tools, vehicles, etc., we are using shed. There is a shed at the bottom of the poet's garden, and the poet wishes to visit it one day. There is a spider web on the door of the shed, and its hinges are rusty and crack when the winds blow. The poet often thinks about it while lying in his bed. On one side of the shed, there is a dusty window, and 3 of its window panes are broken. The poet feels as if someone stares at him through the window, and whenever the poet visits the shed, he would like to find out who lives there. The poet brothers inform him that a ghost lives inside the shed, and if the poet dares to enter the shed, the ghost would chop off his head. Despite these warnings, the poet wishes to visit the shed and peep inside. The poet believes that his brother tells him imaginative stories about the ghost as he wants to keep the shed for himself. The poet no longer feels anyone staring at him or hears any strange noises coming from the shed. The spider, too, is no longer there. Thus, very soon he would go inside the shed. There is a shed at the bottom of our garden with the spider's web hanging across the door. The hinges are nets rusty and creak in the wind. When I am in the bed, I lie and I listen. I'll open the doors one day. The above lines have been taken from Frank Flynn poem The Shed. The poet in these lines is describing a shed that is at the bottom of his garden. At the bottom of the garden there is a shed. Hardly anybody goes inside the shed. Therefore, the hinges or the door joints have become rusty and make a lot of noise whenever the wind makes them move. When the poet is peacefully lying in the bed, he sometimes hears noises from the shed. The poet wishes to be able to open the door of the shed someday. There is a dusty and window around at the side, with three cracked panes of glass. I often think there is someone staring at me each time that I pass. I'll peep through that window one day. The poet discusses how he wishes to stare inside the shed. The shed was dusty old window on its side. Three glasses panes of window are broken. Whenever the poet passes through the shed, he gets the feeling as if someone was staring at him. To find out, the poet wishes to peep inside the shed. My brother says there is a ghost in the shed who hides under the rotten floorboards. And if I ever dare to set foot inside, he will jump out and chop off my head. But I'll take a peek one day. In these lines, the poet discusses how his brother warns him about the ghost inside the shed. The poet's brother talks about the presence of the ghost inside the shed and warns the poet that if he went inside the shed, the ghost would chop his head. However, this does not much frighten the poet. He still wished to one day step inside the shed and see for himself. I know that there isn't really a ghost. My brother tells lie to keep the shed for his den. There isn't any one staring or making strange noises, and the spider has been gone from his web. Since I don't know when, I'll go into that shed one day soon, but not just yet. In these lines, the poet seems to have grown enough to understand the truth. The poet is able to overcome his fears. He is able to understand that there is no ghost inside the shed. He understands that there is actually nobody inside the shed who stares at him or makes those strange noises. The spider, too, is no longer there. His brother had been telling him lies because he wanted to retain the shed for his own self. Therefore, Very soon, the poet would be able to set in foot inside the shed. However, he says that this can't happen immediately. The poem is about the shed, which is a small room away from the main house. It is located at the bottom of the poet's garden. It is in the worst condition. Whenever poet passes through it, he feels somebody is staring at him. His brother threatens him by saying that a ghost stays in the shed, who hides himself under the rotten floorboard with who may jump and attack on the poet. In fact, there is no ghost inside the shed. His brother tells him lie to keep the shed for his den. At last the poet overcomes his fear by saying that he will enter the shed one day soon. A shed is a small room away from the main house for storing or keeping things, animals, tools, vehicle, etc. Here in this poem we get the description of shed at the bottom of the garden with a spider web hanging across the door. The poet could listen the creaking sound of the rusty hinges. He has a desire to open the door one day. The poet talks about a dusty old window around at the side with three cracked panes of glass, and he feels that there's someone staring at him each time that he passes by. One day he desired to peep through the window. Then the poet talks about his brother in the last stanza. Then the poet talks about his brother. His brother says there is a ghost in the shed who hides under the rotten floorboards, and if the poet ever dares to set foot inside, he will jump out and chop off poet's head. But the poet does not believe so. He wants to have a peek one day. In the last stanza, the poet says that there isn't a really ghost. His brother tells lie to keep the shed for his den. There isn't anyone staring or making strange noises, and the spider has been gone from his web, and he does not know when he determined to go into the shed one day. Some key points of this poem are: location of the shed is at the bottom of the garden. A spider's web is seen hanging across the door. When the wind blows, the creaking sound of the rusty hinges attract the poet's attention. The poet is in the relaxed mood as he is now in bed and plans to satisfy his curiosity to see what is hidden inside the shed. Whenever the poet passes through the way, he feels that someone is staring at him. But the poet's brother convinces him by saying that a ghost lives in the shed and he may attack on him if he enters the shed. The poet is partially frightened, but he does not completely believe his brother and has a plan to look through the broken window one day. So, some questions we can write: what is the shed located? Or where is the shed located? The shed is located at the bottom of the garden. What does the poet listen when he is in the bed? The poet listens the creaking of the doors in the wind. According to the poet's brother, who lives in the shed? The ghost lives in the shed. Where does the ghost hide himself? The ghost hide himself under the rotten floorboard. Now let's see the word meanings of this chapter. Dare means to be courageous enough to try or do something. Chop off means remove by or as if by cutting. Ghost means a mental representation of some haunting experiences. Hide means prevent from being seen or discovered. Now let's move to the exercises working with the poem. Answer the following question. First is, who is the speaker in the poem? Answer is, the poet is the speaker in the poem. Frank Flynn is a speaker in the poem because he has a shed at the bottom of our garden. It is written in the first line, there is a shed at the bottom of our garden. So, the speaker of this poem is the poet himself. The second question is he or she afraid or curious or both? Now, here we can see he in very first stanza we can find he was curious, and in the middle of the poem we can see he was afraid. So we can write he is both afraid and curious. Third question, what is he or she planning to do soon? He is planning to look into the shed soon. In the last line we can find the answer. Since I don't know when, I'll go into that shed one day soon, but not just yet. So, the poet is planning to look into the shed soon. Question number 4. But not just yet suggests doubt, fear, hesitation, laziness, or something else. Choose the word which seems right to you. Tell others why you choose this. Not yet, just yet seems to suggest lack of preparation. The speaker wants to be further certain and prepare himself for his endure. He has already overcome his fears. So, there is no fear. However, waiting for the right time could be a reason for postponing the act. Next question is there a room in your house or a house in your neighborhood, locality, where you would rather not to go alone and never at night? If there is such a place and a story to go with it, let others hear all about it. So you can write your experience. There is a storeroom in my house which is in the backyard of the house. It is a little away from the main structure. It is full of odd objects and not even lit properly. Thus, going to the storeroom at night calls for a lot of courage. My mother once asked me to fetch certain things from the storeroom. When I entered the storeroom, I felt as if I saw the movement of the shadows, screamed with terror, but later got to know that those shadows were nothing but my mind's imagination. So, this type you can write the answer. Now let's move some comprehension type of questions. Very short type of the questions. Why were the hinges of the door rusty? Hardly anybody went inside the shed. Since the doors were not opened for a long time, its hinges had become rusty. What does the speaker usually do while lying in the bed? In the very first stanza of this poem, you can see the speaker generally contemplated the idea of going inside the shed. What does the broken glass window suggest? The broken glass panes of the dusty window suggested lack of maintenance. There was hardly anybody who went inside the shed, so cleaning the shed was a distant possibility. Question number 4. According to the speaker's brother, where did the ghost hid himself? According to the speaker's brother, the ghost hid himself under the rotten floorboards of the shed. Few more questions. What did the speaker's brother say about the shed? The speaker brother talked about the presence of a ghost inside the shed. He also warned the speaker that if he ever went inside the shed, the ghost might chop off his head, saying so. The speaker brother frightened the speaker. Comment on the speaker's resolve to go inside the shed. From our reading of the poem, it becomes imply clear that the speaker is fully determined to go inside the shed. Even when his brother threatens him, he does not give up the idea of going inside to find for himself the truth. His desire to visit only gets postponed and delayed. What change occurs in the attitude of the speaker? In the first three stanzas, the speaker seems to be scared the shed. He thinks about the strange voices and that comes from the shed. Somebody mysteriously staring at him. He believed in the ghost story and so on. However, in the final stanza, you can see final stanza of the poem, there seems to be a major change in the speaker's attitude. He has understood that all these ghost stories were a lie told to him, and therefore his resolve to go inside the shed becomes further firm. Why do you think that the spider web hanging on the door was no longer there? The first time when the speaker described the shed, the speaker talks about a spider web hanging across the door of the shed. However, the next time when the speaker described the shed, the speaker shares that it had been a long time since the spider and the web were not be seen. Perhaps the door of the shed had been opened by the speaker's brother, thereby displacing the spider's web that covered the door. If we will solve some questions based on the stanzas, so we can understand the whole poetry very. We are going to solve the extract based question. The extract 1. There is a dusty old window around at the side with 3 creaked panes of the glass. I often think there's someone staring at me each time that I pass. I'll peep through that window one day. Now the extract base is based on this paragraph. And the question 1. What is the condition of the window described in the poem? It is sparkling with its new glass panes. 3 panes of it are cracked. All panes of it are broken off. The children playing cricket have broken the window. Now here we can see the three cracked panes. The answer is three panes of it are cracked. The second question, why does the poet want to peep through the window as he passes it? To see the ghost, to steal something, to find out if somebody is staring at him, to see his brother and his friends. Now the solution is to see or find out if somebody is staring at him. I often think there's something staring at him each time that I pass. So to find out if somebody is staring at him. Question number 3. What feeling of the poet is exhibited in his peeping through the window? The poet is emotional. The poet is careless. The poet has a lot of time. The poet is curious. Now, from this paragraph, we can understand that the poet is curious. What feeling of the poet is exhibited in his peeping through the window? It means every time when he passes through the window, he curious about what is going inside the shed. Now, question number 4. Does the poet get scared at the thought of the peeping through the window? No, the poet does not fear at all. It is his own bold decision. Question number 5. Who, according to the poet's brother, stares the poet? There might be a ghost, as has been told by the poet's brother. So here we can see my brother says there is a ghost in the shed. So there might be a ghost as he has been told by the poet's brother. Why is the window dusty? Now here we can say why is the window dusty? Because the shed has not been used for long by anybody. Therefore, it has become an abode of dust. Now, second extract based, which is starting with my brother tells lies to keep the shed for his den. There isn't anyone staring or making strange noises, and the spider has been gone from his web. Since I don't know when I'll go into that shed, one day soon, but not just yet. The first question, why does the speaker's brother lie to him? Here we can see, keep the shed for his den. He wishes to mislead the speaker. He wishes to slowly use the shed. He wishes to sell away the shed. He is afraid of the ghost. The answer is he wishes to solely use the shed. Question number 2. Since I don't know when suggest. Passage of time. Spider has been killed by the ghost. The speaker being a foolish person. The brother being a liar. Now the answer is a passage of time. Question number 3. Who wishes to go into the shed soon? The speaker, the speaker's brother, the ghost, the dog. The speaker. The speaker wishes to go into the shed soon. Here we can see the last line. Since I don't know when, I'll go into that shed one day soon, but not just yet. Why does the speaker say that there isn't anyone staring or making strange noises? The speaker has understood that his brother had been lying to him in order to keep him away from the shed. Identify the line that has been repeated often in the time. I'll go, you can see, identify the line that has been repeated often in the poem. So the answer is I'll go into that shed one day soon. This is repeated often in the poem. Question number 6. What does this passage say about the speaker? The passage indicates a mature understanding that the speaker has attained. The passage indicates a mature understanding that the speaker has attained. The motive of the poem seems to make learners know about the shed and its significance. The rhythm and richness of the language is impressive. The poet talks about a shed in his garden. The horrific looks repel him from entering it. The rusty and dusty windows, broken windows panes, spider's web in every corner. Scary stories of presence of ghosts have scared the poet. Yet he promises himself to visit the shed in the coming years. There was a shed near the house of the poet. It scared him to tell when he passes by it. The doors was covered with hanging spider's web. The door's hinges were rusty because it was weather beaten. It created a creaky sound while closing or opening of the door. The poet listened to the sound while lying in the bed. Yet the poet decided to open a door to witness everything by himself. He further described that windows were dusty and window panes were cracked. The poet realized that someone stared at him. Whenever he passes through the shed, he decided to open the gate one day. His brother tried to scare him away by telling him that a ghost hides under the rotten floorboards. He would jump off on the head of the poet. Yet the poet did not let his confidence loose. The poet knew that the ghost did not exist in the shed. Rather, his elder brother used the shed as his den. The child realized the truth, so he could not be fooled by his brother anymore. He dared to visit the shed one day. He still waited to realize for the right time to come.